Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rocket's bright glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave?
Absolutely amazing. As most of you know, the city of Petaluma certainly had its sacrifice during the Vietnam War, where 15 lives were lost. I'd like to introduce Mr. Ed Ergert, friend of those 15.
Afternoon, everybody, and thank you for all coming. I'd like to name the 15 names that are on the plaque in Walnut Park in Petaluma that were put 44 years ago on a bronze plaque, again in Walnut Park. And there was a mishap here, and we've replaced it. 44 years ago, which it started actually in '68 and was completed by 1969 in May, we got the plaque replaced and had a wonderful ceremony, and the support from the Petaluma people, the veterans, and the whole Bay Area was unbelievable. With that being said, I would like to read the names of the 15 boys that were just so dear to so many of us and so young, that are at Walnut Park, which I call them the boys. Thomas J. Stancliffe, Robert A. Fenton, Cameron A. Rice, Rodney E. Shipman, Jr., Charles P. Toiliette, Jr., known as Chuck, Larry Eldon Whitler, Etzel A. Frick, we all knew him as Ed, Paul Shrimpman, Kenneth R. Huggins, Casey, Michael P. Horrigan, William W. McConnell, Charles D. Dorman, Donald R. Carlisle, Richard Walker, and Jason D. Honeycutt. It was a long time ago, but we'll never forget. Thank you.
A big thank you to our bagpiper, Senior Master Sergeant Lindsay Wall. Thank you, Lindsay. Well, we're here for a special day in Petaluma, Purple Heart Day. The Purple Heart is awarded in the name of the President of the United States to any member of the Armed Forces of the United States who, while serving under complete authority in any capacity with one of the U.S. Armed Services by April 5th, 1917, has been wounded or killed. The Purple Heart differs from all other decorations in that an individual is not recommended for the decoration, rather he or she is entitled to it upon meeting specific criteria. I'll mention in the Vietnam War, there were 351,794 Purple Hearts issued. The most awards, 8, was for Robert L. Howard. The Purple Heart is a result of sacrifice, for many the ultimate sacrifice. Today, we honor those here today who made that sacrifice and the loved ones of those who never made it home. I'd like to invite Mayor David Glass to the podium to read the city proclamation. And please welcome our 3 distinguished guests, Charles Earthman, U.S. Army, Petaluma resident, John Logan, U.S. Army, and Larry Williams, U.S. Marine Corps. These 3 men, Vietnam veterans who were wounded in action, will receive the proclamation on behalf of the Military Order of the Purple Heart.
I want to thank you all for being here today. Also here is Councilmember Mike Harris. I believe Gabe Kearney is here from the Petaluma City Council as well. The Vietnam experience is something that we should never forget, and there's much to be learned about how this country honors its veterans from that experience. And I'm happy to be part of an appropriate honoring here on behalf of the City of Petaluma today. The City of Petaluma Proclamation, Purple Heart City. Whereas on August 7th, 1782, General George Washington, by general order, established the Badge of Military Merit, an award for exemplary service in the Continental Army during the War of Independence. This was the first military award of the independent colonies and the first award in Western civilization designated specifically for the common soldier. And whereas in 1932, with the assistance of General Douglas MacArthur, the Badge of Military Merit was revived and redesigned as the Purple Heart, a Valor Award for United States Army personnel. And whereas in 1942, President Franklin D. Roosevelt expanded the awarding of the Purple Heart to members of all branches of the armed forces, retroactive to December 6, 1941, and established a uniform application of standards for the award in the Army and Navy. And whereas in 1952, President Harry Truman retroactively extended to April 5, 1917, Navy, Marine Corps, and Coast Guard eligibility for the Purple Heart to cover World War I. And whereas in 1962, President John F. Kennedy extended eligibility to any civilian national of the United States who has been wounded while serving under competent authority in any capacity with an armed force. And whereas the Purple Heart has become to stand as a symbol of dedication and sacrifice by all those who selflessly serve our nation. And whereas the Sonoma County Board of Supervisors recognized the service of veterans of Sonoma County on August 7, 2012, by proclaiming Sonoma County a Purple Heart County. Therefore, as Mayor of Petaluma, we join in that honor, and it's my pleasure to be a part of the ceremony to present on behalf of the entire City Council the appropriate awards to our distinguished guests here this afternoon. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Honorable Mayor, Mr. Noriel, City Council, members of the City Council, and citizens of Petaluma and Sonoma County. On behalf of Military Order of the Purple Heart, Chapter 78, I accept this proclamation for all the veterans of this county and especially of Petaluma that were combat wounded, both veteran and active duty, including those 15 that are on the memorial plaque in Walnut Park. And now to say a little more about the Military Order of the Purple Heart. And this proclamation is Larry Williams, our Vice Commander, and John Logan, our Adjutant.
Before I make any other comments, I'd like to have you recognize in the front row a gentleman named William Fullwider, World War II Navy pilot, and the awardee recipient of 2 Distinguished Flying Crosses, was wounded on a combat mission, I believe, over the South China Sea. Yeah, close enough, right? And still brought his bomber back home with all of his crew members safe. And he has been a long time and still an active member of our chapter at the ripe young age of 92. When the proclamation was read to you, you got most of the history of the Military Order of the Purple Heart. There's only a couple of little things I'd like to add. On August 7th of 1782, when George Washington left Newburgh, his headquarters, and rode down to New Windsor, the encampment of the Revolutionary Army, he awarded 3 of those patches to 3 people who had served in his army during the entire Revolutionary War. If you read the exploits of these 3 people, and you can if you search it out online, you would know that today each of them would have received the Medal of Honor. Outstanding soldiers, they'd all made the rank of sergeant, which wasn't easy in those days, but their exploits were instrumental to the victories of George Washington's army. The only other thing I want to add to that is that we who wear this medal, it's not the medal you go out and join the army and say, I want to get one of those. And we relish every veteran that comes home that never got one. Good for you, right? But at the same time, we are proud of our service, and we are proud of the sacrifice, because we know that without all of those that went before us, and those of us that will still serve in the future, we would not have events like today. So thank you very much.
Thank you, John. Again, my name is Larry Williams, and I am the current Senior Vice Commandant of the Chapter 78 Military Order of Purple Heart. And just as a point of information for you, our area takes in the coastal counties from the Golden Gate Bridge in Marin all the way to the Oregon border. So we are working on trying to get as many of the cities and the various counties, and we've done this in Sonoma and Napa so far. The state of California has been declared a Purple Heart state. In fact, it was the first one in the nation to do so. So this is an ongoing project, but it's also an effort on our part to make people aware that the Purple Heart exists. And there are a lot of benefits that are available to not only the veterans themselves, but members of their family, and oftentimes they simply do not know. So without going into a whole lot of the things that we do, I do want to read something. These are going to be the words of the 58,000 plus names that are on the wall behind me. We're speaking to them, we're honoring them, but they, believe it or not, have something they want to say back to each of you today. And I'm going to read those words for you now. Our days on earth were forfeited so liberty could live. Our fading memory is all that's left. We have no more to give. Though our voices rest in silence, our spirit does not sleep. These many names are guardians of this place where others weep. We thank you for remembering the costliness of wars. Our death past freedom's torch to you, its burden now is yours. Each day your heart connects with ours. Our souls feel the gain. Remembrance is our sweet bouquet. We have not died in vain. And to that I would like to add, the estimates that we're seeing are that somewhere between as few as 300 and maybe as many as 800 Vietnam veterans are dying daily in America. So our numbers were not all that great by comparison to begin with when you compare us to the number of people who served in the military in World War II. And many of them, sadly, are dying as a result of exposure to things like Agent Orange and the maladies that are caused by exposure to Agent Orange, pancreatic cancer being the leading cause of death. Those names will never appear on the wall. They, like the names you see behind me, were actually killed in Vietnam. Sadly, they just haven't died yet. So it's a tribute today not only to the names you see on the wall and the recipients of Purple Heart, but the ones who served over there and sadly are passing away, oftentimes not realizing what has caused their demise. That said, I want to thank all of you for honoring those who are on the wall here today and the Purple Heart as a local organization as well as a state and national organization. So if you have any questions at the end of the meeting, we'll be happy to try to answer them. And if there's anything we can do to help you and your families, we'll be more than happy to try to do so. Thank you. Mayor, we have a little token here, Mayor, for you and any of the council members that are here today. This is a Purple Heart Challenge coin. I want to put this in your hand. And I challenge you and the members of the City Council to continue your good work and the efforts on behalf of your veterans here in the city of Petaluma. Thank you.
Thank you. On behalf of every member of the City Council, I can tell you there are issues that we are divided on. Clearly, our support for veterans has never been and never will be one of those issues. Everybody stands in gratitude for what the veterans have done, and thank you so much for this honor. I appreciate it greatly. On behalf of the City Council, the entire City Council, whether they're here today or elsewhere with their lives, I accept it. Thank you so much.
We have a very special presenter today. Helen Laurent was 22 years old and 7 months pregnant when her husband, Howard Query, lost his life in Vietnam. Ultimately, she turned that tragedy into her life's mission in helping others. She is the author of Grief Denied, a certified life coach, and my dear friend. Please welcome Pauline Laurent.
Hi, everybody. There's some extra chairs here if some of you want to sit down. So thank you for all coming out today to pay tribute to the names on the wall. And I'd like to just share my story. My story is just one story of one name on this wall. And I have about 15 minutes to do that. So I met Howard in the summer of 1965. It was after my freshman year of college. I was going to college at Southern Illinois University in Carbondale, Illinois. And I went to Chicago, and there he was. He was working at a bank. He was the head teller, and he was a very charming guy. So we started dating. He brought me home to meet his parents. We fell in love with each other, and I said at the end of the summer, goodbye, I'm going back to college. So I went back to Southern Illinois University to work on my college education, and Howard followed me. He came down to SIU and ended up enrolling at St. Louis University and went to school there. So I finished my second year of college. By then, he was not academically inclined. He was more of an action kind of a guy, very interested in being in action and what was happening and excitement. So he didn't keep his grade point up to stay at St. Louis University. So he was kicked out of St. Louis University and immediately drafted. And when he was drafted, he went to a recruiter, and the recruiter told him that if he signed up for an extra year, he wouldn't have to be in infantry. So those were the kinds of promises that were made that the Army couldn't fulfill. So anyway, he signed up. He went to infantry training. He went to basic training, infantry training. He was able to get into OCS. He went to OCS, and after 18 weeks in OCS, he was told that he wasn't forceful enough to be an infantry officer. So he was kicked out of OCS, and at the time there was a school called the NCO Academy, and it trained people to become sergeants and then go to Vietnam. So he went to that school, he went to Vietnam. By this time I was pregnant. He was very excited about my pregnancy. I was a little nervous. I didn't really want to have a baby that soon, but here I was pregnant. So he went to Vietnam around the 1st of March, 1968. He was there only 2 months before he was killed in action, May 10th, 1968 in Saigon. When they came to inform me of his death, the poor guy that had to do the knocking at the door and tell me that my husband had been killed, God, I feel for him. I've met men that had that duty, and it's not a pleasant thing to do, to go knock on someone's door and have a pregnant woman come out and say, I'm so sorry, your husband was killed. So I kind of went into frozen mode, kind of shock mode, and because I was pregnant, the baby just started moving, and I thought I'm going to go into premature labor. I was 7 months pregnant. I was really worried I was going to have the baby too soon. It was just so traumatic, if you can imagine. I lost a lot when I lost Howard. I lost him. I lost my future. I lost my faith in God. I lost a lot. But you know, the good news is that I regained it all. I don't have him back, but I have my beautiful daughter who is 45 years old, and she has 2 daughters. So I have 2 beautiful granddaughters who, one is 17, the other one's 13. And I have a good life. You know, my life changed when I started running away from Vietnam. When I started running away from the topic of Vietnam, because I did. You know, my mother said, you got to be strong, you got to eat, you got to sleep, you got to get to work, you got to take care of your baby, you can't afford to cry. So I didn't cry. I mean, I cried a little bit, but not the kind of crying you have to do when you have such a devastating thing. And I'm sure many veterans, I've met many Vietnam veterans since my book came out, and most of the veterans I've met, many of them have not done their grief work either. And finding my book and reading my book has really helped them come to terms with their own losses of the men that they saw die in Vietnam. And for that, I'm really grateful. I didn't set out to write this book. I got busy, I stayed busy, I kept relocating. I went to Chicago, then I went to Denver, then I came to California. And I kept thinking, if I can keep moving, I don't have to face this terrible thing I feel inside of me. So I just kept really busy as a way to avoid the grief. And when I was about 40 years old, I didn't know what was wrong with me, but I couldn't get out of bed anymore. I was really spent. I couldn't fight for what I wanted anymore. And my daughter made the comment, Mom, you've always been such a happy-lucky-go person, and all of a sudden it's like this demon has invaded you, and you don't seem to care about anything anymore. So I finally found my way to an Army psychiatrist who diagnosed me with a depressive episode, a clinical depressive episode. And he said, you'll get over this. The rest of your life is not going to be this painful. You will get over it. And he suggested I take medication for depression. So, you know, I did that. I took the medication and I started changing my life. I stopped running and I turned around and I started, I had put everything that came back from Vietnam in a box. And I had sealed the box shut and I had labeled it Vietnam. And I kept that box in the far recesses of every closet I ever had. And when I would move, I'd pull that box out and I'd look at it and I would get this foreboding feeling like, oh my gosh. And I'd quick shove it away again. And I remember the first time I went to the wall, when I was writing my book. Actually, before I started writing my book, I went to the wall. I hadn't started my grief work. I was in D.C. for a conference. And I thought, well, I should go to the wall. I'm here. My husband's name's on the wall. I should go. So I took a taxi cab from my hotel to the wall. I got out of the cab and I started to walk towards the wall. And I just couldn't make it. I was just terrified. I was by myself. And what was I thinking? I'm going to go to the wall by myself? This is not good. So I quick turned around and continued to run. And ran away again. That was like 2 or 3 years before I had my depressive episode. So I pulled out the box that said Vietnam. I opened it. I read the letters. I listened to the audio tapes that he had sent me from Vietnam. I went for a walk in Armstrong Woods, and I listened to his voice talking about, being in Vietnam. I joined a writers group, and I started writing. And the woman that led the writers group said, I want you to make a list of 10 things you're afraid to write about. And so I made my list, and number 1 was Vietnam. And she said, okay, I want you to take that number 1 item, and I want you to write about it for 30 minutes. So I went out in her backyard, and I started writing, and I started telling the story of the day they informed me of his death. And I had never told that story. I had never written that story. I had kept quiet about it. It was really a good idea that I had the courage to do that. So I just cried all the way through it, and when the time was up, she asked me to read it to the rest of the people at the workshop, and I said, I'm not going to read this. She said, please read it. So I read it, and that was the beginning. Once I opened up the cellar, so to speak, and I looked at my grief, it's kind of like the grief took on a persona of its own, and it wouldn't leave me alone. I had to write the story. So I would write and write and write and write and write, and I'd get stuck and put it away. It took me, 8 years, 10 years to write this book. So the book is Grief Denied, a Vietnam Widow's Story. I'm donating copies today. They're back on the table. Please feel free to take one. Also, what writing this book gave me was a whole new life, because when I was suicidal, I could have easily taken my own life. The only reason I didn't was because, thank God, I had enough sanity to realize that what that would do to my daughter. She already had lost her father, and now because of my depression, I was going to take her mother away. Thank you, God, I didn't do that. And the last 20-some years since I wrote this story, since I got it out of me in this form, have been amazing. So many miracles have come my way. I've met so many people. I took the worst injury of my life, and with the help of many, many people who supported me in continuing to write, many of whom were veterans of Vietnam, and with dear friends and writing teachers, I was able to get the story out. And I just want to urge you, if you haven't told your story to anyone about Vietnam, I encourage you to do so. It has certainly proven to be a valuable thing for me to do. And I've been to the wall in D.C. many times. The first time I went, a Vietnam veteran paid my way to go. He insisted that I could finish my book if I went to the wall. So my daughter and I went to the wall. This was before my daughter had any children. We went to the wall and we stood at Howard's panel for the first time. And my daughter, who was born 2 months after Howard was killed, of course never knew her father. So before we left, she wrote a little letter to her father and left it at the wall. She introduced herself to her father. And then the last day before we left the wall, we stood in front of Howard's name, each of us silently talking to Howard in our own silent voice. And when we got home, about a month later, she called me one day and she said, "Guess what, Mom, I'm pregnant." And I said, really? And she said, yes. And she told me that she'd been trying to get pregnant for a long time, but she hadn't been able to get pregnant. I think it was her own fear of, what had happened to her father. But she said the odd thing is that when I was standing at the wall that day, I asked my dad if he could possibly help me get pregnant. And so I said to her, if I were you, I'd be asking him for a lot more. And that's just one of the many miracles that have happened, in my life since I told my story. I was fortunate to be at the wall one time when they read all the names at the wall. They do that from time to time. A family member can volunteer to read their loved one's name, so I did that. And I think this was in 2002. It was one of those Veterans Days when they were reading all the names on the wall. So I was there, and I had on Howard's uniform. I had on his uniform with all of his medals, and I was there with all my Vietnam veterans friends. And I read Howard's name, and it was quite chilling. It was a beautiful day like it is today, and I came home and I wrote this poem. So I'd like to close with the poem that I wrote that day when I was standing at the wall. So it's called Standing at My Wall. I'm an older woman now, wrinkles on my face, shoulders a bit stooped, standing at this podium, speaking your name out loud. So young and innocent we were, our future ended abruptly, and I've suffered too long. Can you see me here standing in your uniform? Can you see I'm no longer running away from the legacy you left me? It's a stunning, beautiful day here at the wall. The trees are ablaze with the fire of autumn color. Standing here at my wall, facing reality, ending denial, my heart opening wider with each tear that I shed. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Pauline. Well, as we close the ceremony, I want to thank everyone again for coming. It truly means a lot to all of us and the veterans. If you get a chance when you come in, there's a little board over there that'll list all of our sponsors that made this wall possible, and there's a lot of them. And I specifically want to thank the Petaluma Fire Department. They were a big part of this event. And as we end here, I'd like to invite again Katja Willigas.
Amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me. I once was lost, but now when found and grace will lead me home. The Lord has promised good to me. His word my hope secures. He will my shield and portion be, as long as life endures. Oh, when this flesh and heart shall fail, and mortal life shall cease, I shall possess within the veil a life of joy and peace. When we've been here 10,000 years, bright shining as the sun, we've no less days to sing God's praise.